You're standing in your kitchen after dinner, and you finally say, "I need you to call before you just show up." The room goes quiet. The other person crosses their arms. "So now I need permission?" The tone shifts. What started as a simple request suddenly feels like a battle over who's in charge. You don't like admitting that every time you try to set a boundary, you brace for a power struggle. Here's the interruption you can use today, exactly as written: "I'm not trying to control you. I'm explaining what I will do." Say that once, calmly, when the tone starts rising. Then stop talking. In the next 10 minutes, something changes. The conversation slows instead of escalates. You feel your shoulders drop because you're no longer arguing about authority. You're clarifying your own behavior. The other person may still react, but you are no longer pulled into proving dominance. You step out of the contest. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. This won't eliminate tension, but it will prevent it from turning into a contest. The real problem isn't the boundary. It's the framing. When boundaries are delivered as demands, "You need to stop," "You can't do that," "You have to," they often trigger defensiveness. The other person hears control, even if your intention is protection. And once the conversation shifts into control, it becomes about winning. This is costing you peace. Every boundary becomes emotionally expensive. You either withdraw to avoid the fight, or you push harder to defend your ground. Both drain the relationship. What makes this so exhausting is that you may not even want control. You want clarity. You want predictability. You want respect. But if the delivery sounds like authority, the reaction often becomes resistance. By the end of this lesson, you'll understand how to set boundaries using calm consequence clarity instead of commands. You'll reduce escalation because you won't be negotiating authority anymore. And you'll feel steadier because you'll know exactly what you're responsible for and what you're not. If you've ever walked away from a conversation thinking, "Why did that turn into a fight?" this is for you. Subscribe if you want practical relationship tools that protect calm without turning you into the enforcer. First, you'll see how shifting from demands to personal consequences changes the entire tone. Next, you'll learn how to stay grounded when someone tests that boundary. Then, you'll practice what to say when accusations of control show up. Finally, you'll step into a real scenario where the old pattern of escalation almost takes over, but doesn't. Later, there's a moment where someone says, "You're just trying to control me." That's where your steadiness will matter most. You're at a family gathering in Ohio. It's loud, casual, and familiar. Someone makes a joke about how you never show up anymore. You smile politely and try to let it pass. Then the same person says, "You should really make more time. It's not that hard." Your chest tightens. You say, "I'm busy." They respond, "We're all busy." Suddenly it's not about scheduling anymore. It's about who's right. Here's the microscript: I'm not telling you what to do. I'm letting you know what I'll do. That single shift changes everything. Instead of saying, "Stop pressuring me," which sounds like an attempt to control their behavior, you say, "If the comments continue, I'm going to step outside for a bit." Or, "If we keep going in that direction, I'll end the conversation." Notice the structure. You're not commanding them. You're clarifying your response. This works because power struggles require two people trying to control outcomes. When you remove your participation in controlling the other person, there's nothing left to wrestle over. You're not negotiating their freedom. You're defining your own. In many North American households and workplaces, boundaries get tangled with authority. If someone feels corrected, they instinctively push back. Even adults respond to tone the way teenagers do. Any hint of control activates resistance. Picture a workplace example. You're in a meeting in Seattle. A coworker constantly interrupts you. You've had enough. The old approach might sound like, "You need to stop cutting me off." That immediately invites defensiveness. They reply, "I'm not cutting you off," and now the room is tense. Instead, try this. When I'm interrupted, I'm going to pause and finish my thought before moving on. Then do exactly that. You're not accusing. You're not diagnosing their behavior. You're setting a predictable response. The Stoics spoke about focusing on what is within your control, your judgments, your actions, your choices, not other people's reactions. A boundary framed as a demand attempts to control what isn't yours. A boundary framed as consequence clarity keeps your attention where it belongs. Your tiny action today is to rewrite one boundary from command language into consequence language. Command version, you can't raise your voice at me. Consequence version, if voices get raised, I'll step away and talk later. Command version, stop showing up unannounced. Consequence version, if you come by without calling, I won't open the door. You may feel uncomfortable saying it. There's a vulnerability in not forcing compliance. You're allowing them the choice to continue the behavior and trusting yourself to respond consistently. Slow practice moment. Before delivering the boundary, take one breath and relax your jaw. Speak one notch slower than usual. Calm tone is critical. If your body sounds tense, the message will still feel like a challenge. Now here's why this matters later. If you don't separate control from consequence early, every disagreement will escalate into dominance testing. You'll either push harder or retreat completely. Both create resentment. But when you consistently communicate, here's what I will do, something shifts over time. People learn your patterns. They understand that you're not threatening, you're predictable. Predictability lowers tension. This doesn't guarantee compliance. Some people may still test. That's normal. But because you're not arguing about authority, the emotional temperature stays lower. The boundary becomes information, not a battle. And when it's information instead of dominance, escalation has nowhere to anchor. You're sitting on the couch after work. You finally say, I'm not comfortable lending money anymore. The other person leans forward immediately. So you don't trust me? The temperature rises. Your heart rate follows. You start explaining. Then defending. Then listing reasons. 10 minutes later, you're arguing about your character instead of the money. The mistake isn't the boundary. The mistake is over-explaining it. When a boundary turns into a debate, it usually means you slipped from clarity into justification. And justification invites negotiation. Here's the correction: stop defending your preference. Use this line instead: I understand you don't like it. I'm still choosing it. That's it. No extended reasoning. No persuasion attempt. No moral argument. This works because power struggles feed on explanation. The more reasons you give, the more openings you create. The conversation shifts from your choice to whether your choice is valid. And once you're defending validity, you're fighting for authority again. In many relationships, especially in North American culture where assertiveness and independence are prized, boundaries can accidentally trigger ego friction. The other person hears, you're wrong, even if you're simply saying, I'm not available. Picture a friend in Los Angeles who often invites you out last minute. You've started protecting your evenings for rest. You say, I'm not going out tonight. They reply, you've changed. You feel the pull to explain how tired you are, how work's been intense, how you need recovery. Instead, try, I get that it's different. I'm still choosing it. Notice the tone. Calm. Short. Steady. Here's why this matters. When you over-explain, you subtly signal that your boundary requires approval. And if approval doesn't come, you feel pressure to revise it. That's how resentment builds. The Stoic approach reminds you that your choices are yours to govern. You can explain once for clarity. But after that, repetition becomes defense. Your tiny action today is to practice one non-defensive repetition. Say your boundary once clearly. If challenged, repeat it calmly without adding new information. For example, I'm not discussing that topic. But why? I'm not discussing that topic. You don't raise your voice. You don't harden your face. You keep your breathing steady. The repetition itself communicates firmness. Now here's the interrupt pattern. When you feel the urge to defend, ask yourself silently, am I explaining for clarity or for approval? That question slows escalation. Slow practice moment. Place one hand lightly on your leg under the table. Feel the contact. Ground your body. Speak slower than your emotional impulse wants to. Slowness reduces perceived aggression. What often happens next is revealing. If the other person realizes there's no argument to win, they either adjust or drop the subject. The power struggle dissolves because you're not participating. But this is where many people slip. When the other person accuses, you're being selfish, you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, the instinct is to correct the accusation. To defend identity. Instead, stay anchored to behavior. I hear that you see it that way. I'm still choosing this. It feels almost too simple. But simplicity prevents escalation. Here's why this matters later. If you can't tolerate mild discomfort during accusations, you will revert to over-explaining. And over-explaining reopens negotiation. The cycle continues. But when you hold steady without escalating tone or expanding explanation, something shifts inside you. You feel less reactive, less entangled, more self-governed. Boundaries stop feeling like battles. They become statements of direction. And direction doesn't argue. It moves. There's a belief that if you don't push back hard, people will walk all over you. That belief sounds protective. It sounds strong. But often, it's the reason boundaries turn into power struggles in the first place. The myth is this: if I don't assert dominance, I'll lose control. Here's the truth: dominance invites counterdominance. When your boundary carries emotional force, sharper tone, faster speech, tightened jaw, it signals threat. The other person's nervous system reacts accordingly. Even if your words are reasonable, your intensity frames the moment as combat. The stakes are subtle but significant. Because once a boundary becomes about who wins, the relationship shifts from cooperation to competition. And competition corrodes trust over time. So here's the clear instruction: separate firmness from force. Firmness is consistent and calm. Force is loud and urgent. Use this script under pressure. This isn't a debate. This is what I'm choosing. Notice what it does. It doesn't insult. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't escalate. It simply closes negotiation without raising emotional volume. Now picture a real scenario. You're in a living room in Denver. A relative repeatedly makes comments about your career choices. You've already said you don't want advice on the topic. They continue anyway. The room is full of other family members. There's social pressure. The old pattern might sound like this: I've told you before, stop. The tone tightens. They respond defensively. Others get uncomfortable. The tension spreads. Instead, you say calmly, if the advice continues, I'm going to change the subject or step outside. You don't glare. You don't raise your voice. You don't demand compliance. You state consequences. Now here's the durability test. They smirk and say, you're too sensitive. That's the moment. Slow practice moment. Inhale slowly. Let the breath out longer than you want to. Keep your shoulders relaxed. Make eye contact without hardening your face. Then respond, maybe. I'm still stepping outside if it continues. You're not correcting their interpretation. You're not engaging in the insult. You're staying anchored to behavior. This is where strength shows up, not in volume, but in steadiness. Many people think calm equals weakness. But calm under pressure signals control. And control over yourself is the only form of control that doesn't trigger retaliation. Here's the deeper pattern at work. When someone tests your boundary, they're often testing consistency. If you wobble, explain more, laugh it off, retract, they learn that persistence overrides your clarity. If you stay steady without escalating, they learn that your pattern is reliable. Reliability lowers drama. The Stoics emphasized mastery over reaction. Not suppression, but governance. When someone pushes, your instinct may be to push back. But matching force creates a loop. When you reduce force while maintaining firmness, the loop breaks. This doesn't guarantee the other person will approve. Some may remain irritated. Some may push again later. That's not failure. That's human friction. Your responsibility is consistency. Later, you'll see a full scenario where multiple small tests occur in a short window: comments, jokes, subtle digs. That's where emotional endurance matters most. Not one dramatic confrontation, but steady repetition. Because boundaries that don't turn into power struggles are rarely loud. They are steady, predictable, calm. And calm under pressure changes the entire dynamic. You're sitting at a small dining table in your sister's house in Atlanta. It's Sunday afternoon. Plates are half finished. Conversations overlap. Someone brings up your recent decision to cut back on family visits because your schedule has changed. Your uncle laughs and says, "So now you're too important for us?" The room chuckles lightly. Your stomach tightens. You already explained your new schedule last month. You thought it was clear. But here it is again, the same tone, the same implication. Old pattern almost activates. You feel the urge to respond sharply. To defend your priorities. To explain again how busy work has been. To justify why your time matters. Instead, you slow down. You put your fork down deliberately. You take one breath. You remember, I'm not trying to control anyone. I'm explaining what I will do. Calmly, you say, I'm not trying to distance myself. I'm choosing a schedule that works for me. Your uncle leans back. Sounds like an excuse. There it is, the hook. Old reaction almost wins again. You want to correct him. To list reasons. To make him understand. The internal pressure builds. You catch it. Am I explaining for clarity or for approval? You answer yourself silently, approval. So you stay with consequence clarity. If the comments keep going in that direction, I'm going to step outside for a few minutes. The table quiets. No raised voice. No sarcasm. No edge. Your tone is neutral. Predictable. Your uncle rolls his eyes slightly. Wow. Sensitive. You feel heat rise in your chest. Slow practice moment. Inhale 4 seconds. Exhale 6. Keep your jaw relaxed. Don't rush. Maybe, you say calmly. I'm still stepping outside if it continues. Silence lingers. Someone else changes the subject. The moment passes. Now here's what's different from the past. In the past, you might have laughed nervously and stayed. Or snapped back and created a bigger argument. Or over-explained until the room felt heavy. Today, you did none of those. You didn't win an argument. You didn't convince anyone. You didn't dominate the exchange. You simply stayed steady. Later in the meal, a smaller test appears. A cousin jokes, "Don't say anything, or they'll step outside again." A few people laugh. You feel the urge to defend again. To clarify that you weren't overreacting. Instead, you smile lightly and say nothing. You don't reward the bait. The energy settles. By the end of the afternoon, you notice something subtle. The tension is lower than it would have been if you'd escalated. You didn't storm out dramatically. You didn't attack anyone's character. You maintained your boundary without turning it into a referendum on respect. On the drive home, you reflect. You still feel slightly unsettled. You wish it had gone more smoothly. You wish no one had tested you at all. But you also feel steadier. You didn't abandon your boundary. You didn't turn it into a fight. You didn't collapse into silence. Something is clearer now. You can tolerate mild discomfort without converting it into conflict. The relationship isn't magically transformed. Your uncle may test again in the future. The pattern isn't erased. But the dynamic shifted slightly. You prove to yourself that firmness doesn't require force. And that steadiness prevents power struggles from taking root. It's not perfect. It's ongoing. But it's calmer. And calm changes the tone of everything that follows. When you react, you try to control the other person. When you respond, you govern yourself. Reaction turns a simple boundary into a contest about who wins. Response keeps the focus on your own choices and behavior. One is emotionally urgent and scattered. The other is steady and intentional. That difference is what keeps boundaries from turning into power struggles. Throughout this lesson, you didn't learn how to dominate. You learned how to anchor. First, you interrupted escalation by separating control from consequence. Instead of saying, "You need to stop," you shifted to, "If that continues, I will." That one adjustment moved the conversation away from authority and toward personal responsibility. Then you practiced replacing command language with consequence clarity, which lowers defensiveness because it doesn't threaten someone else's autonomy. Next, you learned to stop over-explaining. You saw how justification invites negotiation and how calm repetition without added defense prevents escalation from reigniting. Finally, you stepped into a real scenario under social pressure and practiced steadiness, slower tone, relaxed posture, consistent follow-through, even when someone tested you publicly. Notice what changed across all of those moments. You stopped trying to win. You started trying to remain steady. That shift matters because power struggles thrive on mutual intensity. If one person raises the temperature and the other mirrors it, the loop tightens. But if one person remains emotionally regulated and consistent, the loop weakens. You don't extinguish conflict by overpowering it. You weaken it by not feeding it. Now here are exactly 3 do-today steps you can implement immediately. Step 1. Choose one boundary that has repeatedly escalated in the past and rewrite it into consequence clarity. Write it out physically. For example, instead of "Stop criticizing me," write, "If the criticism continues, I'm going to end the conversation." Keep the sentence short. Keep it behavior-based. And make sure the consequence is something you can actually follow through on. No threats. No drama. Just a predictable action. Step 2. Practice one calm repetition today. It doesn't even need to be in a major conflict. If someone pushes back on a small preference, like your schedule, your availability, or your decision, state your position once. If challenged, repeat it calmly without expanding your reasoning. This builds emotional endurance. The goal is to feel the discomfort of not defending yourself excessively and remain steady anyway. Step 3. Regulate your delivery before you speak. When you feel tension rising, inhale slowly for 4 seconds and exhale for 6. Relax your jaw. Slow your speech slightly. Tone carries more weight than wording. A calm sentence delivered calmly prevents escalation before it begins. Those 3 steps, clear consequence, calm repetition, regulated delivery, form a stable structure. You don't need complex scripts. You need consistency. Here's what happens over time if you apply this consistently. People begin to recognize that you're not reactive. They may test once or twice. They may even push harder at first. But when they realize the pattern doesn't change, that you don't explode, you don't over-explain, and you don't retreat, something shifts. The relationship recalibrates around your steadiness. This doesn't mean everyone will approve. Some people prefer relationships built on emotional leverage. When that leverage stops working, they may resist. That resistance isn't proof that your boundary is wrong. It's proof that the dynamic is changing. The deeper Stoic principle here is self-governance. You cannot control tone, interpretation, or approval from the other side. You can control your clarity, your consistency, and your follow-through. When you focus exclusively on what is within your control, escalation loses its anchor. Power struggles often start because someone feels their autonomy is threatened. When you frame boundaries around your own behavior instead of theirs, you remove that threat. You're not taking power. You're defining direction. And the direction is quiet. Direction doesn't shout. Direction moves. There will still be uncomfortable moments. There will still be times when someone accuses you of being rigid, selfish, or dramatic. That's normal. Emotional steadiness doesn't eliminate friction, it contains it. What changes is how you experience it. Instead of leaving conversations drained because you argued for dominance, you leave feeling grounded because you remained consistent. Instead of replaying debates in your head, you feel a clearer internal line: I said what I would do. And I did it. That builds self-respect. And self-respect reduces resentment. If you want to strengthen this skill further, the next logical layer is learning how to stay calm when someone misrepresents your intentions or accuses you unfairly. A useful follow-up would be emotional control, staying calm while setting the record straight. That lesson builds on this one by teaching you how to correct misunderstandings without sliding into defensiveness, which protects both your clarity and your relationships. Because here's the reality. Boundaries don't fail because they're too strong. They fail because they're delivered with emotional volatility or defended excessively. When you lower volatility and increase consistency, relationships stabilize. You don't need louder boundaries. You need steadier ones. And steadiness compounds over time. If you want to keep building calm authority in your relationships, not through dominance, but through disciplined emotional control, subscribe and continue strengthening this skill one lesson at a time.